Thing you asked.
Yeah, we want to at least record what you say.
Yes. So now now it's recording. Want to do that nice part about me again?
Yeah, sure. I didn't say much, but I just said, hello, Micronet. This is Vivian Sophia, your Micronet coordinator, introducing Jeremy Rosenberg, the manager of Identity Management Services here on campus. And he's going to talk about the CalNet roadmap and the Identity Management roadmap today.
Thank you. It was even better the second time. So thank you for giving me the time to talk about this stuff. As Vivian said, I'm Jeremy Rosenberg. I'm the manager of CalNet, and as of yesterday, I've been doing that for a year. We had a great meeting yesterday with the team to talk about all the wonderful things we've accomplished in the last year. And but we've actually only made a little bit of a dent in this roadmap that I'm going to show you. So, but luckily it is all on schedule, which is exciting. So I like to start this presentation with this slide because one of the challenges we have doing central identity management is trying to communicate what it is that we do and why it takes so many of us so much time. Because on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? It's a username and a password. What's the big deal? But that's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what it is that we do. You see, underneath that page, that login page, we have 3 CAS servers. These are the servers that actually generate that page, that actually interact with all the different applications that you need to log into. Underneath the CAS servers are 3 things called Kerberos servers. This is where the passwords are stored. This is what CAS uses to make sure that they know who you are. One of those Kerberos servers is actually down in San Diego, so that we can stay up even if our own machine room goes down. We have 2 Shibboleth servers. So these Shibboleth servers are the things that allow us to log into non-Berkeley things like Google Apps or collaboration tools at other universities. We have 6 OpenDJ servers. These are our LDAP servers. These are the things that store all of the identity information that we have about people. 3 of those are dedicated just to CAS. 3 of them are used throughout the university. We use a tool called OpenIDM. This is the thing that populates LDAP and Kerberos. This is the tool that actually grabs all of the identity information and stuffs them down into all the different locations that need to know about them. We use an open source tool called Grouper. This is a group management tool. This is something we use to do access control decisions. Are you in this group or not? And then under that, we have this thing called the Berkeley Person Registry. Now, this is what we've been working on. I'm going to talk a bit more about what the Berkeley Person Registry is. But basically, this image is meant to demonstrate that the Person Registry takes data from our different systems of record. And here we have HCM, SIS, and advancement, and forms one common picture of people. And I'm going to describe how that works in a minute, but it has been brought to my attention that makes it look a little bit like making sausages, and that's actually not a terribly inaccurate analogy. So why do we do IAM centrally? Why don't we just let everybody figure out their own identity thing for whatever application they're running? Well, we're trying to make it easier for developers to do the right thing, and the right thing being have proper identity management mechanisms. Because application administrators they're focused on delivering their own specific functionality to get their application to do the thing it's supposed to do. Having to deal with usernames and passwords and stuff is actually a bunch of extra work, and it can be a big job on its own. The other problem is we're trying to avoid this thing called identity fragmentation, where each user has like a dozen different sets of credentials to log into all the different things that they need to access. We're also saving time and money. It's a lot of work for an application to manage computing credentials. I forgot my password. I have a new person and they're in India and they need a username. And it's also a pain for the users, right, if they have to manage multiple computing accounts. And if you think about it, this is something we do all day, every day. If all we do is save 30 seconds because you didn't have to type in your password twice, when we multiply that by the number of people we're dealing with, there's actually some significant time savings across an institution this size. We do this to remove barriers to collaboration because really collaboration is global now. Research groups don't just live at Berkeley, they're all over the place. And when they go to interact with each other, they need to know who they're working with. They need to know that the person at the other institution is who they say they are. And so we need to provide tools to make that happen. We also need this to be a self-sufficient thing. This has been a big goal of ours over the last year. People need to, there is no model for us to hold everybody's hand. I know that our own support staff, CSS, IT, the Cal One Card office, they already spend a lot of time helping people get their passwords reset and claim their credentials and stuff. That can only ever represent a very small number of people, or we would quickly get overwhelmed. We need to provide tools that let people assert themselves electronically in a way that is automated and scalable. And they need to have those tools available to them. We also do this to provide continuous improvement. You know, one of the things we talked about yesterday was the little things that we've done over the years to actually improve the overall stack. It's like I say, it's a big job in and of itself. And one thing my team does is every time an opportunity presents itself, we look for ways to improve the stack. And so you end up with this very mature system over time that actually answers a lot of the issues. And we have to do that because, frankly, the private sector has moved past us in a lot of ways. Google and Facebook and Twitter, they're the ones who are rolling out things like OAuth and two-factor, and users are showing up at the university expecting an experience that they're used to. They can log into anything with their Facebook credentials. Why is it such a pain to get a CalNet ID? So we have to keep modernizing, and a dedicated team does that. So what are our challenges? This is going to come as no surprise to anybody who has anything to do with IT. We're always being pushed to provide functional enhancements, do more stuff, you know, groups and permissions and auditing and all the things that people need. At the same time, we have to make sure this thing is rock solid, right? CAS can't go down for 5 seconds before our phone starts to ring. Everybody uses it. You know, we cannot spend enough time reinforcing the foundation. And then one of the flip side of having such an experienced team is that we have to worry about succession planning. We can't ignore the fact that our very experienced staff who know this stuff inside and out are going to move on. And so this is sort of the 3 things that I find are always pushing at the resources, or pulling at the resources. And so one of the ways that we're addressing all of this at once is to start reframing, or to continue framing, how it is that we approach these challenges with something we call the CalNet Cookbook. And so in a nutshell, CalNet provides the ingredients, recipes, and cooking lessons to allow UC Berkeley technologists to create secure, effective, and delicious identity and access control solutions. And so I underline the word technologist because really that's what we do. Now, sure, we make sure that everybody has a CalNet ID and a password, and we make sure that we know who they are and what they do. But really, we do all of that so that we have the tools and the infrastructure in place so that the people making applications and providing services can then leverage that to make their stuff work, and make it work in interesting ways that require them to know about the people who are accessing their tools. So it's the technologists on campus that are really our partners in this. So this is the roadmap that we've been working on. I originally did this presentation in February, and so we've actually made quite a bit of progress on this. But I'm gonna talk about where we've come and where we're going. And I've split this into 3 sort of main streams that I consider to be the 3 things that we sort of do. We do identity management, which means we figure out who people are and we capture all the information we can about them. We do access control, which means we provide tools that let you decide whether or not a person should be allowed to do something. And we provide authentication, which basically tells you that, yes, we can assure you that the person is who they say they are, or at least they know that person's password at this point. So the first big piece on here is the Berkeley Person Registry. And so this is a big piece. The Berkeley Person Registry it does exist now in the form of a bunch of scripts that query data sources and fill up LDAP, but we want to create something more extensible, more robust, and gives us more flexibility. So this is a calculated person representation. So people exist in the student system, the HR system, the alumni system. We bring them in and we want to have one common view of that person. And that's something that makes universities unique. A lot of corporations don't do it that way. I like to use the example of a bank. If you work at a bank, then you'll have some credentials you log into the payroll system. And if you're a customer of the bank, you'll have different credentials that log you in to check your bank account. But nobody would try to make those the same set of credentials. Those are just 2 separate systems that have nothing to do with each other. But in the university, that's not how we work. There's a much fuzzier line. We have We have employees taking courses. We have lots of students taking research positions and getting paid. And we don't want people having multiple sets of credentials. So doing this merge of people is a big part of what we do. And we want this to be extensible because these are the three big systems of record. There's a couple of other little ones that we want to be able to include. And we actually want to make this so that we can have hundreds of systems of record. Anybody, any group on the university that can assert any one attribute or multiple attributes about a person, then it may, if it has value to be in the central repository, we want to make that possible. And we also want to make sure all this data is stored upstream of LDAP. Right now, LDAP is our registry, and that provides challenges because not everything necessarily needs to be exposed that way. So I was going to throw up this slide, which is our architecture view, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go for a little simpler, although I will share that with you if anyone wants to see it. So let's just walk through what this looks like. So at the beginning of this process, we have the system of record. Right now, that's HCM, the Student Information System, and ADVCon, which is our advancement system. And of course, the SIS is about to be swapped out, which actually triggered this whole thing. There it goes into a tool that we call the System of Record Gateway. And this was a very clever mechanism that our lead architect designed that lets you take systems of record in whatever format are available. Right? Often systems of record are in different levels of maturity. If all we need is a flat file of data, then we'll take that and import it. If we can have access to the database, or if you can send us real-time messages, then we can import it and create a unified view of the identity information. And this is the biggest piece of the thing. Well, I guess the biggest piece is actually the match. Trying to figure out when it's the same person. If sometimes, or ideally you have social security numbers or something that is unique across people, but often we don't, especially when we have people coming from all over the world with different sets of information. So we have a very sophisticated ID match tool that tries to figure out when it's the same person. And then once they do figure it out, they push it into this registry database. We use this PostgreSQL database that actually lets us store the data in a number of different ways so that we can use it when it comes time to provision it. And so the provisioning engine, and that's the piece that actually gets that data, the registry identity information out of our database and into the places where it needs to be consumed. And that's in LDAP, Active Directory, Kerberos, and even through REST APIs so they can be queried. And so that's how we start with these disparate systems of record and get them out to where they can be consumed by the university, and they have in a way that is fairly standard. So that is basically what the person registry does. Now, when it comes to rolling that into our cookbook, here's what a recipe might look like. Maybe you want to load departmental attributes into LDAP. So say you want to set access based on lab assignments. Well, the only place that those lab assignments exist are in your system or in the department system. So this recipe will help set up a data feed for department-specific attributes from the local system to the central person registry. And then these attributes make their way into LDAP where they're available when you go to make access control decisions. Or maybe they get used to load into our grouper mechanism so you can make group queries. So this would be the type of recipe that you would see in the CalNet cookbook. So the next piece of the puzzle is the SIS import integration. And I'm going to talk a bit about how many different types of, how many different things here are affected by the SIS, but this is the big one. They're going to stop feeding us data from the old student system, and we're going to start picking them up from the new one, and they're going to look different, and it's a big job. So that's what we've been working on all along. I have September 2015 as the timeline here, and that's still pretty accurate. I'm surprised because back in February we were sort of guessing. We will actually be going into production with the first round of that in December, but we'll have to start testing by the end of September. And then we will actually not complete the full integration until February, which they're calling Go Live 4, which gets us ready for the new round of undergrads. But for the most part, we're right on schedule with that piece. And I don't actually have a recipe for that one because it's really sort of behind the scenes stuff. Ideally, nobody will notice. That's the whole point. Then we have the guest account refactoring. So guest accounts are an interesting case. They sort of live in their own silo right now, and that's fine because we want to make sure they don't get access to things they're not supposed to. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but the biggest challenge is that when people create a guest account for somebody who later gains a more formal role with the university, whether they plan to or not, it's really hard for them to keep those credentials. So the new guest account system will be better integrated with our main repository of identities, but in a way that allows them um, to not have access that they shouldn't have, basically. And so the example I use is if you're working with some partner, you don't actually intend for them to be a big part of the university. You just want to get them a guest account to do something, but maybe they later take some kind of official position or even become just a more formal affiliate, and you want to keep that account. So this will sort of describe, hey, I have this person, they just need a guest account, but how do I get them a guest account in such a way that doesn't, sort of paint me into a corner? So that's what that recipe would look like. So then the access control stream. So group management is something we've been working on. We've had this grouper tool up for a while, but getting it to sort of a production-ready place and a place where it's actually usable. The big knock on the grouper tool, the open source tool, was that it wasn't very friendly to use. Well, we've since upgraded that. This is what we've been doing, and we've actually pretty much met our August deadline already. So what we've got is the tool is now being used actually for our SPA integration. That's how you manage your SPA membership. It is also loaded with official groups. So it now has all employee groups, all student groups, and it also has departmental groups. So it only goes by department code, but there are groups that are pre-populated with the people who are in a department. And I'm going to talk a bit about what that means or why you want to have official groups. In fact, I'll talk about it right now. The recipe this is why we populate official groups, is because maybe you want to make an ad hoc group that only includes active employees. Well, ad hoc means you have to go and figure out when they're an active employee. Well, let's say you want to define a group of people who can access your departmental application, but only as long as they're on payroll. So what this recipe would do is it would explain how you create a composite group that includes members who you add, so you have your list where you just add people to it, but it also cross-references the all employees group. So if they stop being an employee, they will drop out of the all employees group. And when I say stop being an employee, it means that our nightly feed that we get from the HR system tells us this person is no longer an employee. They will stop being in that employee group. And since that is a requirement for them to be in your group, they'll actually drop them out of your group automatically. So as a result, you get automatic deprovisioning of people from this group. And I'm going to talk about why that's cool in a second. Because the next step, the thing that we're working on now, is group distribution. And so so the grouper tool itself has REST APIs, you can call it, but that's a little bit heavy-handed. So one of the things that it's a little bit beyond what a lot of people want to get into. So so the group distribution job is to push it into LDAP, make sure it's in Active Directory, and also into Google Groups. So as a result, you could use your groups in Google or CalShare. So say you want to limit access to a B drive folder and a CalShare folder to the same list of people. This is part of how you've set up your department. Well, this recipe will explain how to do that. And of course, when you combine it with one of the official groups, people will actually lose access to that Google B drive or to that CalShare the moment they stop being a member of a full employee. In fact, maybe a better example is when they stop actually being part of your department. So if you tie it to they have to be in your department, then as soon as they move to a different department, they will automatically not be able to get into that B drive anymore. So that's the type of cool deprovisioning that we're hoping to get. So then there's Cal Access. So Cal Access is an interesting tool that our team developed that allows you to, it's basically a workflow engine that lets you request access to certain tools. So I think it's being used for Cal Answers. And some of the database services. And basically, you request access to something, it gets routed to the person who gets to make that call, a business owner, and then they're approved. The challenge in its current form is that we tried to keep a fairly distinct line between what our group can do and and how far into the actual application that's using it can go, because we don't have the resources to help everybody do the integration. So we just sort of drop it in a database. What we're doing with Cal Access is we're actually integrating with groups. So the result of the workflow, the result of the yes or no question means that you end up in a group. And so then that's a way, and then we've already sort of talked about all the different places that that group membership goes. So it goes off into Google or it goes off into an application. And so the SIS team, one of the things they're doing is they're actually going to have administrative access to SIS features based on group membership, and they're going to use this tool to request that. And so a recipe would be basically how you offload manual access control decisions to the business owner. So if you have somebody, if the director needs to approve people's access to a given tool, you just tie access to your application to the group, and then you let Cal Access determine who's allowed to be in the group through this workflow. And then the director will basically click yes, and the person gets into the group. You know, this is about that. This comes back to that principle of making people self-sufficient, of letting the technologists set this up once, and then the business owners can make the business decisions. You don't have to call your support, your tech support, to do these types of access control decisions. So then onto the authentication mechanism. So credential management. Credential management is basically the usernames and passwords, your CalNet ID. This includes all the deputy infrastructure that we have, the Cal One card for setting passwords. We have different ways of getting you your CalNet ID depending on whether you're a grad, an undergrad, an employee, and we're trying to sort of unify all of that in a way that makes it feel more modern and more the way that people expect to have access to to capture these credentials, to get them in the first place. So one of the things we're doing is when you first show up, you will get an email to your external email address if you've provided one, and then you can follow that link to claim your account. And we will have better password reset tools so that we can use that external contact method or a cell phone number to get you a reset link. So these are the types of things that we're working on right now. And that should be ready, I think, by the end of September. I've seen it in development already. And so an example here is how you get a password to a remotely located researcher. So you have a researcher who's in the field, her password's been compromised, and she has to reset it remotely. Right now, it's actually really challenging. In fact, we don't even have a way of contacting people when their password's been compromised, right? Because we can't email their Berkeley account. We've locked that down. And we don't have a good store of their external email addresses. So that's something that that we'll be able to do is we'll be able to trigger a reset via password for them. And then we're into CAS authorization. And so this is a big piece that I want to make sure I touch on, because it actually is going to affect everybody who has any application on campus. So out of the box, CAS does authentication. Basically, here's a CalNet ID and a password, and if they match, they get through. What most applications are supposed to do, and most do, is then make some kind of an authorization decision. So yes, I've verified that this is Jeremy Rosenberg who's come through, or somebody who knows Jeremy Rosenberg's password, but do you want to let Jeremy Rosenberg into your application? The answer should be no, by the way, because it's nothing but trouble. But that's the authorization decision. And so usually people do an LDAP lookup to find out some more attributes about them. Well, we want to actually roll that into CAS. So if you don't necessarily have the flexibility in your application to make these access control decisions, what you'll be able to do is actually use the group management tool to set the permissions on CAS. So basically, CAS will not only verify that you have a username and password, that you know the username and password, but you are also a member of this group. And if you aren't, you don't even get past the CAS page. And so in this way, we have this fallback decision. We have this fallback safety mechanism that makes sure that people who don't fit a certain criteria can't even get close to your application. Now, you're still going to want to do authorization if you can, because this is a blunt instrument, right? The SIS tool, as an example, there are people who need to log into it because they have administrative access to do things, and students who log into it to check their grades. You still need to be able to do that. They can't just sort of say at the CAS level, don't let students in. That doesn't make sense. But for applications where that does make sense, where it's your departmental application, and if somebody is not in your departmental group, they shouldn't even be able to get near the thing, then this is what this tool would do. Now, this also gives you a couple of added benefits. Let's say that you need employees to be able to access this, but not students. But sometimes a student will be an employee for a short period of time. And so while they're an employee, they should have access to your tool. Now, once they stop working for you, they go back to being a student. They still have their same CalNet credentials. They can still log in with CAS, but you don't want them in your application anymore. Well, because they've lost their employee access, or even better, lost membership in your department, they can't access your thing anymore. They can't access your application anymore. And so basically, this is about enforcing this idea that a CAS login, a CalNet ID, really shouldn't mean that much. And this ties back into the guest accounts, right? We said we keep the guest accounts sort of quarantined to make sure that they don't leak into applications where they don't belong. Well, this will make sure that that happens. And this is why, and when I say this is going to impact everybody with CAS, is because we're actually going to set a new default on CAS. And now we're talking about in the spring, where all applications that use CAS by default will only let people in if they are a student or an employee. So they have to be in the all students or all employees list. And we're going to do that retroactively. All applications that are already using CAS must be an student or an employee. If your application should allow guests in, or alumni, or pre-cers, we call them, the admits who get CalNet IDs so that they can say they want to come here, but they haven't come here yet, then we'll give you tools to say so. So you'll be able to, so basically what I'm saying is, if you want anybody other than students and employees into your application, you'll have to opt into that, as opposed to right now where we're sort of we're letting everybody through and giving you the responsibility to figure out who shouldn't get in. And so this will be a big switch. We're going to give lots of notice starting very soon, because I have since learned that as part of the SIS project, they want to run all admits through CAS. So, which they do now, but we're going to actually be doing it in a slightly different way, so that we won't have basically people who are being offered admission but haven't accepted yet will be able to use CAS to log in, but we won't be requiring as much information about them. So we want to make sure that everybody knows exactly who these people are before they're allowed to get through CAS. And so I have March on here, but it looks like we're going to have this done by February 15th, which is the next go live for the SIS project. And so from that point forward, you will have to specifically say that you want people other than students and employees into your application. And there'll be a whole bunch more information about that. But since I'm here and I'm broadcasting and recording, I thought I would make sure that everybody understood this. And then the last piece of this is multi-factor authentication. And I know at least one person mentioned that they were here to hear about this, and I wish I had more to say. I do have more to say than when I first did this presentation. I had put it in here because it's an important thing for us to do. And so multi-factor, for anyone who doesn't know, means that it isn't just, you don't just have to provide a username and password, you have to have something else, a thing that you have. And so sometimes that means a token, the old, I don't know if everybody has ever seen these RSA things. It's got a little LCD screen on it. And when you go to log into something, you have to type in the number that's on your little screen, and that number changes every minute. There's more modern ways. We have a tool called Duo, which is two-factor, which some people may have used. It's in pilot. It uses your cell phone, basically. So you go to log into something, you type in your username and password, but then it sends a message to your phone that you have to answer in order to be allowed access to the tool. So what we've been doing now, I don't know how many people know this, but shortly after I started a year ago, the CalNet team was reorged into Paul Rivers' group, the Chief Information Security Officer group. And so now we've always worked closely with the security team, but this is a joint project that we're working on to figure out how to do this the most effective way. The biggest challenge with the multi-factor is you sort of have this requirement to get people, how do you get this second factor to people? How do you either onboard their phone or get them some kind of a physical token, and what do you do if they lose that? And so we're actually working closely with the vendor now, this Duo vendor who seemed to be a good choice, to find out how they've done this in the past. We want to do this right. We don't want to just throw it out there and hope for the best. So that's where we're at, and we're still on track for hopefully having this rolled out by October 2016, if not sooner. And the idea there is that we will have a mechanism that sort of rolls this out in a logical way. We have very high value targets that we'll want to protect with this first, but One of the most important things that we want to protect is payroll information. We've had compromised accounts where people redirect direct deposit. Well, we want to be able to protect that. Well, as soon as you do that, we now have everybody who gets a paycheck from Berkeley needs one of these two-factor things, and that's a huge number of people for us to support. But luckily, there's a good infrastructure in place. We're talking to the CSSIT. We're talking to the security folks. We have deputies available. And so we're going to figure out a good way to do this. And the recipe here will be basically for somebody who wants to protect their service and at different levels. So you may be able to check your email with just a username and password, but in order to update your direct deposit information, you would need this second factor. And this, like I say, would prevent stolen credentials from being used to redirect paychecks. So this is an important piece. And so then the last thing I like to throw out there is the caveat, which is the elephant in the room, the SIS project. So you can sort of see the stuff that we have loaded up at the front is impacted by the SIS project because that's sort of our big driver now. They're swapping out one of our biggest source of people, I guess alumni is technically the biggest, but we get a lot richer data from the SIS. So it's a big job. And Cal Access, I think they would like that by February. We might have to move that up from next August. The CAS authorization, they need that for February, so we're going to have to move that up. And so these are the things that are sort of driving us now. And so I reserve the right to say that all of this is not going to happen in this order because of the SIS, although as it turns out, it's pretty much on track. So that's my last slide. That's the story. Like I say, I'm happy to say that the predictions we made in February are mostly coming true, thanks to a tremendous amount of hard work from the CalNet team. And I'm happy to answer questions now for anybody who wants to get into any of these things. Yeah, back there.
Whatever category that they have in HR, so that per diems are going to be allowed, or contract workers because they are not technically an employee, contractor, and that's
right. So the question was, are we when we say all employees and all students, what affiliations does that mean within HR? So we're doing that analysis now. We do have when we pick these official groups, the thing that we kept going around on is, what is an unambiguous official group? What would unambiguously be considered an employee? And so we were going by flags that we see in HCM. I think there's a staff flag and a faculty flag. And if it's one of those flags, then we're considering them an employee. The non-employee affiliates, I think, wouldn't be in the all-employee group. Like, is that right, Jeff? Jeff's the one who was doing all the logic. So in that case, anybody who isn't an employee, which probably means being paid, would not be in the all employees group. Now, we will have this well documented, and that's why we wanted to make this fairly clear. So I think that if you want those non-employee people who are in HCM into your application, that would be an addition that you would make. Right. I mean, there is we do have an all community group, which is sort of like everybody who's in the HCM or in the student group. But that is why I'm bringing it up now, because there will be some analysis that everyone's going to want to do to make sure that the groups that they expect to have access to their systems do, because that's sort of the challenge is, if I say to you, who do you think has a CalNet ID? You get dozens of different answers. Some people will think that volunteers don't, or some people think that guests don't, or that a guest means something more than it does. Because part of the SIS project, I mean, at one point they were talking about not just admits, but all applicants, all 90,000 people who apply to come to Berkeley, which just means you need to pay the $70, should get a CalNet ID. And so we certainly couldn't do that. I mean, they decided not to go that route, but if they did, would the people who are currently using CAS be expecting that particular population? As far as I know, they're still planning on giving CalNet IDs to parents. You know, so do you expect parents to be able to get into your application? So that's why before this, and so over time, I could see the definition of a CalNet ID getting much broader. And so before that happens, we want to put in the controls so that nobody is surprised by who gets in. And so documenting what that means is a big part of that. Yeah.
This is better suited for writing an app in Node.js right now, and a lot of these modern application frameworks have a lot out of the box. So this particular application I'm writing, sourcing the authentication with a lot of Google stuff with the host domain. Is there any way to do authorization after that? Like, is there any integration with these groups with the Google stuff? I'm not very familiar with it.
Yeah, so the question was about using OAuth as a mechanism for doing authentication and then also authorization. So it sounds like you've already figured out that because we do have a Google Apps instance, that you can leverage that OAuth tool. And OAuth, for anybody who doesn't know, is the thing when you go to log in with, when you go to some website that isn't Google and say log in with your Google credentials, and the little screen comes up and says this application wants to use your Google information. That's OAuth happening, and so that's the way to do it. I don't actually know enough about OAuth, so it would be an interesting conversation. But I wouldn't be surprised if you could leverage the Google groups once that happens to make authentication. But I really don't know. It's a good question.
One important thing to note there is that not everybody who has a CalNet ID is entitled to an account in our Google instance. You know, students, employees, and a handful of affiliate types
Right.
at the moment.
So our Google man just pointed out that not everybody who has a CalNet ID also has a Google account. So OAuth, using OAuth that way is not a perfect solution. That's a good point.
Depending on what your audience is, it may be.
Right.
But
yeah, but for sure, follow up with that. Drop an email on the CalNet dev list, because I know a lot of people are doing stuff with OAuth. Any questions? Yeah, right here.
So will you have to link your application somehow to a department code for this?
So the question was, do you have to link your application to a department code for CAS authorization? We're actually still discussing the mechanism. We're going to bring in some professional services to get this done in time. And so we're going to talk about the best way to make the CAS authorization work and be performant enough, because anything that you put in the workflow of every single CAS session, I mean, we do 150,000 authentication events a day. So that's the scale that we have to address. But what we're thinking is that what we'll do is we will actually map every CAS service to a group. And that group will, by default, have all students and all employees in it. If you want to add more people, you will have control over who goes in that group. So if you want to bind your application to just your department, then you would add that department to the list of requirements. And so by them being in that group, then that would be the requirement. And you could take the all students and all employees out and only have your group in there. So that's, you know, the challenge is the UI, is how do we give you the tools to do this so that you're not calling poor Jeff every time you want to update who can access your CAS page, because that's not good for you either. So I think the Google API might, or the Google UI might be the way to do that. And of course, that was an interesting slip, because Google does have a robust API. So if you have some other mechanism by which you want to set this access, you can write directly to the Google API and update your own group that way. So that's the other benefit of tying this all to Grouper, is you get that full suite of tools.
is there any sort of timeline on the two-factor?
Well, October 2016 is when we're hoping to have it out. And we've started now just because there's a lot of prep and a lot of work that needs to go into getting there. But that's what we're shooting for. It's probably the deadline that I'm least confident of, just because I'm not entirely sure how we get there. But I don't want to give any roadmap presentations without talking about multi-factor, because it's so important.
There's still funding issues. I mean, that's really the main impediment to funding. So we put forward funding proposals for two-factor for the campus before, as I think you know, those were turned down. And so we're putting together another case to say we have to fund this, because there's not enough people and money to fund this effort without stopping doing something else on this roadmap. Nobody says stop these other things. So that's why we need this additional funding if we're going to do this. So we've been trying to build this case of why we have to do that. In fact, that's where I'm going at noon, Cal Hall, to try to build this case for the Chancellor's office. Because there's been a lot of events around the system lately that's gotten a lot of attention around two-factor. And so we're saying that this is the single most important thing we can do on the security side, is to have a broad two-factor implementation for all workloads. So I think that's why we can't really commit until we know that we have the funding to do it. We don't know what the deadlines or what the timelines might be. But as Jeremy said, we're starting to talk to the vendor so that we start to get our ducks in a row, so we have a plan, so we know what the resources that would be required, so that we have a solid funding proposal that we can stand behind, all that kind of good stuff. All that stuff is started, but until we have a commitment on the funding, we can't say go.
So that was my boss, the Chief Information Security Officer. He said that two factors happening, but if there's any chancellor listening, we need money to do that, and that's what we're waiting for. But no, we're working hard on it. And I was mentioning before, I think before you got here, that I think there might be, I think that there's more understanding of how important this is than there was. But you're doing your thing to make sure of that. Yeah.
You guys are definitely including so that people can be members of multiple departments when people have multiple appointments and or they may work in one department, but they volunteer in another one as well.
Yeah, I mean, out of the box, it's very broad. As long as you have an employee role or a student role, you're in. When people beyond that, it's up to the individual owner of the application to decide. But a person can be in lots of different groups, and a group and the group that you would make is an additive group. So it's everybody who's in this department or this department or this department, depending on which ones you add. So yeah, we have discussed the fact that the data we get is not always as comprehensive as it could be, and so we've discussed the fact that sometimes people don't update records as quickly as they should because they don't understand what the difference is. So there is going to be a bit of a learning curve, I think, for the community where they'll recognize that when somebody changes departments, make sure you update that in HCM quickly because their access to the stuff they need to do is going to be dependent on it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and frankly, sometimes these things don't change until the visibility is there. I mean, the truth is, we can, like we're going to default it to all students, all staff, because that is what, when we look at what we think people who aren't giving this much thought believe that their CAS application is getting. If they don't even think too much about it, then they probably just sort of assume that, if you have some formal relationship with the university, you can get in, and that's mostly true. But it probably means you are expecting students and employees to get in. They'll learn, quickly that which people are accessing their application who don't fit that category, and then we'll very quickly get them in. But they'll have made that they'll have that awareness, and so there could be a little bit of pain, but there are big challenges that the university has around auditing who has access to what applications, and it's so spread out now that there's no good way to answer that. Ian.
I know that in terms of the access, I know that a very common way to do it these days is to look at the affiliate types and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that when the new method comes up, that there's some documentation that sort of provides a clear mapping. So, if you want this older sort of affiliate type to have access to your app, do this.
Right. So,
because I know that, like, for example, on Google, we do, employee, student, and 6, specific affiliate types that are allowed in.
Right. So Ian's talking about the current LDAP structure that identifies what affiliate types people have. That's a common way people are making these access control decisions now, and so that is sort of what we're basing a lot of the information we have on what people want to see. Yeah.
How are you going to make this determination about spa accounts?
So this is a question about SPA accounts, which are the special purpose accounts, which I actually forgot to mention in the credential management part. So these are our special purpose accounts that basically allow you to create a departmental type account and then log into that with your own personal credentials. And so you're wondering how SPAs will dovetail with the access control decision? It's a good question. How would it work? I don't think so, because CAS is asserting the SPA as the identity. So if I, without having thought about it before this, I'm pretty sure, I'm looking at Jeff now, that it would be the SPA's membership in a group that would be the thing we would use to determine. And Jeff is nodding, so.
Well, right now, it shows like, for example,
yeah, but it's an interesting question because the access control decision is being made inside of CAS, and CAS knows both who's logging in and what SPA they're pretending to be. So theoretically, CAS could be making the decision based on either, but I think the clearest thing to do would be to use the SPA as the thing. So basically, if you want a SPA to be allowed into your application, that SPA would have to be a member of the groups.
I might choose to use a SPA in a particular way that would match the access requirements for the box, but somebody else might use the SPA in a way that they should be for a million other things that wouldn't match that. And then how would you distinguish?
At the end of the day, the person running the application has to understand what a SPA is and understand that is a possibility, that a SPA really just means that it is a non-person account that is accessible by a number of people. And so that gives them less assurance as to who or what that SPA is versus an employee account. So this is a challenge with the whole SPA thing, is what should a SPA be allowed to do? And honestly, that is up to the application. All we can do is tell you everything we know about the SPA. But, it could certainly, if you're expecting a SPA to only be operated by people with a given relationship to the university, that's not a good assumption to make, because the truth is you could have a very loose affiliation of the university and have access to a SPA.
And now the SPA is service. There's even less.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Well, you have to be an employee. You have to be an employee, and so the assumption is that employees have to respect the university policies around IT resources like anybody. Well, that could be. Yeah, that could be, and I think Ian even brought that up as well. We're working that into the documentation, just about being clear as to what a SPA is when you create one. We do have quite a bit of logging on the SPAs. One of the things we have in there is that it emails us when somebody creates their 20th SPA, so we know who's making a lot of them, stuff like that. But for the most part, we're addressing issues around SPA when they happen. I don't know how we doing on time. Yeah.
I think way back when you were talking about merging data sources process, because obviously it's a complex process of matching these things. What happens to quickly small amounts of information which you can't match? Which you can stop off or something? What sort of percentage of people can you actually not reconcile?
Well, it's interesting. This is actually a hot topic right now, because before we go live, we have a reconciliation manager application. We have a whole bunch of business logic that attempts to make exact matches, and we actually just And so we ran all of the current, what we've been doing for the last, I think, about 6 months is as new people come in, we run them through the match engine to see either they're an exact match, they're for sure not a match, or they're a potential match. And so, just the other day we went in and there were about 1,000 potential matches. And so we went and looked at, and so there's a tool there for the data analyst on our team to go in and say and do some analysis with their human brain that should be better than the computer brain and figure out whether it's a new one or an existing match. But what we found was out of these 1,000, there was a pattern. All of the ones from advancement were not matching because there is no SSN. And so there was a whole bunch of them that were not matching, but ADVCon does send us the student number. We just weren't using it. So we should be able to match on the student number. So we update the rules to use the student number. We also had a whole batch from HR that weren't matching because the name in the registry had first and middle name in one field, which is how the old SIS does it. So we update those rules. And so we're going to see how many still show up as partial matches. But the answer is we do our best. We refine the rules. But at the end of the day, somebody is looking at the ones that we're being very conservative about what we consider to be an exact match, because there are some weirdnesses in the current sync code that, like one of the things, unfortunately, it does is it's accepting 5 zeros as a legitimate SSN, last 5 of SSN. And so if 2 people don't have an SSN, has been entered as 5 zeros, but have a similar name, it is matching them. And it's actually a lot harder to split one that's been matched incorrectly than it is to merge one. So that's actually been the biggest piece of this puzzle. That's the one to crack. And actually our architect, who's no longer with us, well, he's still alive, he's just not with the team anymore. He came up with a fairly clever solution to leverage the power of Postgres and a fuzzy match plugin to do this matching. It actually gives us the tools to compare a ton of fields with each other very quickly with certain distances and fuzzy match logic. So it's working really well. Does that answer your question?
Still got some poor humans.
Yes, that poor little human back there is working on it. But it's fun though. It's actually kind of like a video game, trying to match. But it's interesting because we were looking at it and we're like, well, under what circumstances would the computer not be able to match, but the human would? At what point does the human sort of use their gut instinct to say, yeah, that's probably the same person? And the truth is, you don't necessarily ever want to do that. Hopefully we get it down to 1 or 2 a day at most, and then that person actually has to do a little bit of research, because really we're talking about setting someone up who's going to have a fairly substantial relationship with us. And so getting it right off the bat, because once somebody creates their account, a second account, and it makes it out into the wild and gets set up somewhere, it's a nightmare to pull it back in. Oh, there's a Microsoft update. Very important. I even turned notifications on. Yeah, any other questions, concerns, comments? Anybody excited? Want to go run out and make some groups? Yeah.
I do work in a building with very bad cell phone.
Okay.
So if you're on a laptop, you need 2-factor authentication. They don't even have landlines.
It's a push notification. So you just need that.
Yeah, that's how mine works.
There are other options too. It also does support the 6 that rotates, so you can have your photos now. Actually, you can still see that in phone.
But now you know why we need a bunch of money, because it would be easy if there was ubiquitous cell coverage and everybody had a new iPhone. Yeah, no, exactly. And the
Airbears no longer does Airbears 2 is Airbears.
Yeah, but then you're talking about your Airbears authentication, basically gateway out to be able to get second factor authentication. So are you sort of building your security point on better sand?
Then you just hit the little lock button, it'll give you a 6-digit code, like you mentioned in your set.
Yeah,
It doesn't actually get with the 6-digit code, it doesn't go out.
Yeah, my team's all excited. Well, Carl's very excited about using UB keys. So a UB key is a little USB key with a button on it, and you just push the button, and Ian's got one too. So you just plug that in, push the button on it, and you don't even have to type the 6-digit number. It pretends to be a keyboard and types it in your machine for you. And it does all kinds of fancy things. He has his SSH keys in it and all kinds of stuff. So, but figure out who needs what mechanism is why Paul is going to ask the chancellor for money, or some version of that. Threaten the chancellor with horrible things. Yes. Sounds like a loaded question. Do I see grace periods changing? I don't, but we will certainly have more flexibility to do that. One of the things that we've noticed is that different people are doing their own grace period calculations, and it would be nice for us to be able to sort of centralize that in some way. But Frank, honestly, we haven't really talked about it. The only thing we did talk about is whether or not we want to err on the side of caution as we're changing over systems and delay killing some accounts just in case we miss something. But as an ongoing business process, we haven't talked about it. Yeah, that's what I'm.
So I think it wasn't intended.
Oh, okay.
Because if people are managing authorization appropriately.
Oh, I see where you're going. Yes, that's.
So it's that thing. But right now we have to see if
Right. That's actually a fantastic point. Thank you. Yes. So we're talking about grace periods being relevant when you're not doing authorization, because if you're just assuming that when a person stops being an employee, they will no longer have their CalNet ID, that's actually not true. There's a grace period where they still get to log in. One of the things that we talked about and that Jeff wrote into the all employees group is all employees does mean you're not in your grace period. It means that you have a current active affiliation. So if you want people in their grace period then you need to be looking for in your grace period affiliation, whatever or I think it's got an expired. Anyway, it's a different group. All employees, including those in their grace period, is different than all employees. So yes, grace periods are one of the reasons that we even want to do this authorization stuff, because bottom line is we don't want people relying on the existence of a CalNet ID to mean anything. That's basically what we're getting at. So yes, thank you. I was wondering where you're going with that. All right. Can people at home ask questions? How does that work?
I've been looking at the things people are typing and nobody has typed.
No. Are they typing nasty things? Are they saying, oh, more CalNet in their stories?
People just type some things that never happened.
Oh. All right. Well, I mean, Summer here, who's sitting here, has joined us as the CalNet Communication and Support Coordinator, and so she is hard at work on the CalNet Cookbook. There hasn't been a lot of progress on it just because we haven't had the resources, but with the new fiscal year, we were able to bring Summer in, and so you'll be hearing a lot from her. She'll start to send out emails and get our new website up, and so a lot of this stuff will start to appear and be wonderful. So thank you very much for your time, and feel free to follow up with us at any time. Did you want to?
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for coming and telling us all this. I mean, you can tell they've been working very hard at making a lot of changes to the way that CalNet works. Next month, we're going to have Larry Conrad, the CIO of UC Berkeley, here at Micronet. So I encourage you to think about coming to that meeting. And I guess we're going to close early. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Oh, shake your hand. I guess I can stop the recording.
Yeah.
Goodbye, people at home.